On the 31st of August 1995, a man drove up to Althorp with a folder of forgeries. His name was Martin Bashir. The papers inside were fake bank statements built to frighten one family into trust. And the brother who met him that day, Charles Spencer, opened a door. He did not know what he was opening. None of us did, not then. 3 decades later, that same brother keeps a different door locked, and he will not open it for anyone. Not for a streaming giant, not for £100 million. Honestly, by some accounts, not even for her own son. The gate stays shut. Now look, to understand why a 61-year-old man in Northamptonshire matters this much, you have to go back to that folder. The papers were forged bank statements. They showed money supposedly paid to people close to Diana, money that did not exist. The whole point was to make a frightened woman believe everyone around her was a spy, and it worked on her brother first. Here is the thing most coverage skates right past. Bashir did not go to Diana first. He went to Charles Spencer. He sat at Althorp on the last day of that August and showed him the fakes. Spencer believed them the way you believe a respected name from the BBC. And on the 19th of September, he introduced the journalist to his sister. That is the wound under everything that follows. Spencer was the door. He held it open without knowing what walked through. What walked through was the most damaging interview of her life. 23 million people in Britain watched it that November. Around 200 million more watched across the world. She sat in that soft light and said there were 3 people in her marriage, and the country never looked at her the same way again. For years, the BBC swore the forgeries had nothing to do with it. They ran their own little inquiry in 1996 and cleared their man. They were lying, basically, and they knew it. It took until 2021 for a proper judge, Lord Dyson, to say it plainly. The documents had deceived Spencer. The deceit had opened the door. The whole thing was rotten at the root. Think about what that does to a brother. You spend your life believing you protected her. Then a judge tells you on the record that you were the one who let the wolf in. Not on purpose, not knowing, but you, all the same. And here is the part I cannot stop turning over. Diana spent her last years more frightened, more isolated, more convinced she was watched, and a chunk of that fear was manufactured by a reporter with a printer. That is not gossip anymore. That is a finding. You remember where the story ends. It was August 1997, Paris, a tunnel, a car going too fast. She was 36 years old. 2 boys woke up without a mother, and one of them was only 12. If you were alive that morning, you remember exactly how the news felt coming through the radio. I do. Here is what I think, and I will say plainly, it is what I think. The guilt that Judge confirmed in 2021 is the engine of everything Charles Spencer has done since. Every refusal, every locked drawer, every year of silence, it is a man doing penance for a door he wishes he had never opened. But the penance came later. First came the funeral and the speech nobody who heard it ever forgot. Stay with me, because the next part is where the brother became the guardian. He stood in Westminster Abbey in front of the whole grieving world. He looked at the family his sister had married into, and he made a vow about her 2 sons. He said her blood family would not let their souls be defined by duty alone. It was extraordinary, honestly. A brother at a funeral, drawing a line around 2 boys in front of 2 billion people. And then he did the quieter thing, the one that actually matters now. He buried her at Althorp, on an island in the middle of a lake on the family's own land. not in a royal vault, not in a public cathedral where the institution controls the gates. He put her somewhere only the Spencers hold the key to. The gate stays shut. That choice was the whole strategy before anyone called it a strategy. Diana would not belong to the firm in death. She would belong to her blood. And the things she left behind, the private writing, the home films, the unguarded photographs, those went into the dark and stayed there. For nearly 30 years, producers have come knocking. Every anniversary brings a new pitch, a new definitive film, a new checkbook. And the answer every single time has been no. Not for money, not for legacy, not for anyone. The result is something genuinely rare in this age. There is a private Diana the world has never been allowed to consume. A real one. And she exists only because one man kept saying no. Now, while Spencer was guarding the past, the future of the family was quietly changing hands. Not with a dramatic abdication. Whatever you may have heard, that did not happen. Charles is still king. He is older. He has cancer. He has been treated since early 2024. And the work has been shifting toward William the way real power actually moves. Slowly, quietly, without a single trumpet. William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall in 2022, the moment his grandmother died. That is the engine that funds his family, a private estate worth a fortune, handed down by blood, not by vote. So when people ask who holds the future, the honest answer is already on paper. It moved to William the day the late Queen passed. And here is a detail the loud channels keep getting wrong. There is no secret document handing Catherine some hidden power to run the country in the shadows. That is invented. What is real is plainer and, to me, more interesting. After Harry left and Andrew fell, the family had a genuine problem. The people legally allowed to stand in for the king had thinned out. So in 2022, Parliament quietly passed an act adding Anne and Edward to that small group of stand-ins. No drama, no leaked diary, just a law written in daylight that worked the two absent sons out of the machine without ever naming them as the reason. That is how this family removes you. Not with a scene, with paperwork. The palace calls that housekeeping. I call it the clearest signal we got that the door back in had quietly closed. Which brings us to the people standing on the wrong side of that door. Because while Spencer guarded the vault, another household was running low on the one thing it was built on. Let us be honest about what the Sussex operation was actually selling. When Harry and Meghan left and gave up their working roles, they had to build a business on something. And the one asset more bankable than all the rest combined was the connection to the crown and to Diana. Watch how it goes. Their first Netflix series, the one about leaving, became the biggest documentary debut the platform had ever seen. Over 80 million hours watched in its first days. That was the high watermark, and it was built on royal wounds. People did not tune in for recipes. They tuned in for the inside of the palace. Then look what followed. A polo show that, by Netflix's own numbers, barely registered. A lifestyle series with Love Meghan that limped into the bottom of the charts and got savaged by reviewers across the board. From papers that loathe the monarchy to papers that love it. When the critics who normally defend her are reaching for 1 star, that is not a hit piece. That is a verdict. The Spotify deal, gone since 2023, 1 podcast and out. The big £100 million Netflix arrangement, reports through 2025 said it would not be renewed in its old shape, replaced by something smaller and safer for the streamer, the message from the audience could not be louder if it were written across the sky. The world wanted royal wounds. It did not want the brunch. So here is the question that hangs over everything. When the only product that ever truly sold was proximity to the crown and to Diana, where do you reach when the money runs thin? You reach for the deepest wound there is. You reach, the story goes, for her. That is the version going round the royal corners of the internet right now. That a grand 30th anniversary Diana project was floated for 2027, fronted by her own son, and that it would have wanted the vault, the diaries, the films, Althorp itself as a backdrop. I cannot confirm that pitch was ever real, and no serious paper has stood it up. But you do not need the rumour to see the logic. You only need the ledger, because the pattern is real and it is years long. The borrowed jewellery at the big photographed events. The interview in 2021 that rebuilt Diana's confessional beat for beat. Same hush, same sympathetic chair. The docu-series that used her tragedy as the origin story, the justification, the frame, each reach a little larger than the last. And here is the part I cannot get past. Every single one was made without consulting the man who actually keeps her account. Make of that what you will. But people do not borrow against a name for years and then expect the keeper of that name to sign off on the biggest loan of all. And there is a parallel move happening in the family that tells you how these people think when the ground shifts. Stay with me, because the timing on this one is cold. In February of 2026, while the whole country was watching Andrew get arrested, Queen Camilla quietly transferred her private home, Ray Mill House in Wiltshire, the one place that was truly hers, bought with her own money in 1996 after her divorce for £850,000. The papers said she sold it in a panic. She did not. The land registry shows it went to trustees acting for her own children. Now, the people close to her call it ordinary family planning. Maybe it is. But I went and read what was actually filed. And the part that stopped me cold is the timing. The same month her brother-in-law is arrested, she moves the one asset no one in that palace can ever touch out of her name and into her children's. There are a few ways to read that, and everyone is colder than the last. Maybe it is tax smart housekeeping, maybe it is instinct. Or maybe, and this is the one I keep landing on, you do not quietly fortify the only thing that is truly yours unless some part of you has already done the math on losing. That is two Guardians, by the way, reading the same season very differently. Camilla pulling her one true asset into the family trust. Spencer keeping his sister's memory off the market entirely. One protects property. One protects a person who can no longer protect herself. Here is what I cannot ignore, and it is the heart of the whole thing. William wanted this commercializing of his mother stopped years ago. Everybody who covers this family knows it. But think about his position for 1 second. He is the future king. He cannot publicly block his own brother's films without manufacturing a global headline about palace censorship and a war between two sons. The moment the institution says no, it reads as the institution protecting itself. But when Diana's own brother says no, nobody can spin it. There is no palace to blame. There is no power play to expose. There is only a man who stood at her coffin and meant every word, telling the world what he thinks of what is being done with her memory. The one no that cannot be bought belongs to the man with no crown. Do you see the quiet genius of it? William never has to lift a finger. Whether that is coordination or just two guardians arriving at the same wall from different roads, I cannot tell you for certain. No one outside that family can. But the wall is there and it holds, and only one household takes the hit when it does. And the wall held precisely when the money got desperate. That is the timing I keep circling. The reach for the deepest wound came exactly as the easier products stopped selling. A locked gate at Althorp is louder than any documentary ever made. Now, let me give the other side its full weight because it deserves one. Harry has a real claim here, and pretending otherwise is dishonest. Diana shaped both of her sons. Harry held her hand through hospital wards and homeless shelters. He walked behind her coffin as a child, in front of the entire planet. Nobody can take that perspective from him, and nobody should try. If anyone alive owns a piece of the truth of who she really was, it is the two boys she raised. So you can stand in both pairs of shoes and feel the floor tilt. Imagine being William, watching the worst day of your childhood scheduled like a content drop. Now imagine being Harry, told the story of your own mother is somehow not yours to tell. Both of those hurt. Both are true at the same time. This was never really a fight about a documentary. It is a fight about who owns a story when that story belongs fairly to more than one grieving person. But ownership is exactly where Spencer holds the cards, and the law backs him. The grave is on his land. The archive is in his house. The choice is his to make. And the rift around it has not softened an inch. The brothers have not properly stood together since their grandmother's funeral, back in September of 2022. Harry said on the BBC last year that he wants reconciliation. He had a brief tea with his father last autumn, the first in over a year. He still did not see William. And this July, Harry is expected back in Britain with his family, a visit that, by every report, has William furious rather than hopeful. Here is the version the palace would like you to accept. A family slowly, sadly drifting, no villains, just distance. Here is what I cannot ignore. The thing the family fears most is not anger. It is the content calendar. They are afraid that an honest dinner becomes raw material, that a quiet word becomes a streaming product within 18 months. The whole rift, stripped to one word, is trust. And there is none. That is the real wall between them. Not pride, not protocol, the fear that grief gets filmed. And then the consequences started landing for real on someone who once looked completely untouchable. Because if you want proof this family eventually acts, you don't need an invented scene. You just need the news. Andrew, the king's own brother. For years he seemed beyond reach, protected by blood and a borrowed grandeur. In October of 2025, he gave up his titles. Days later, the king stripped the rest, the dukedom, the prince, all of it, by letters patent under the Great Seal. He became, in plain ink, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And in February of 2026, police arrested him on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The King's statement was 4 words at its core: let the law take its course. From a monarch who hides everything behind soft language, that was a blade. His own brother, and he reached for the plainest sentence in the language. That is the answer to anyone who says nothing ever happens to these people. Something did. To the most protected man in the family. Diana never got that kind of reckoning in her lifetime, and that is its own grief. But the principle she was denied, that the truth eventually arrives, is finally walking through this family's own front door. And it is walking toward the Bashir story too, which is the part that should make you sit up. In November of 2025, a journalist named Andy Webb published a book called Dianorama. It laid out the full scale of the forgeries and the BBC's long cover-up, 30 years on. The wound Spencer has been guarding is not closing. It is reopening in public with receipts. So watch what is actually happening here all at once. The fakes that fooled her brother are being re-examined in daylight. The most untouchable man in the family has been arrested, and the keeper of her archive will not let her memory be turned into a launch event. The scales she was denied in life are slowly and from 3 different directions tilting back. Here is the twist nobody scripted, and it is the truest thing in the whole story. Nobody had to move against the people selling Diana. There was no secret order, no dramatic confrontation. The structure did the work. The grave sits on Spencer's land. The papers sit in Spencer's house. He simply has to keep doing what he has done for 30 years, which is nothing. He just has to not open a door. And the loudest statement anyone connected to Diana has made in 3 decades is a lock that does not turn. The gate stays shut. Call it what you like. It is not revenge. Revenge burns out. This is something steadier. A brother remembering the difference between who a family belongs to and who it merely married. Diana was exploited once by a man with forged documents and a camera. Her brother decided she would not be exploited again by anyone with a pitch deck and a rescue plan, even one carrying her own surname. I could be wrong about the motives. I have told you where I am guessing. But the lock is real, the grave is real, and the man holding the key has not flinched in 30 years. The full truth of how she was manipulated is still arriving, book by book, year by year. And when it has all arrived, I think it lands on the side of the brother who shut the gate, not the ones who keep knocking. So let me leave it with you. Where were you that August morning in 1997 when the news came through? And do you think a locked gate at Althorp is the last act of love a brother had left, or one veto too far? I read every comment, and I mean that. Tell me what you remember of her.